The ocean was quiet before dawn. The SEAL training boat sat half submerged in its own silence, barely humming. 12 nautical miles out. Simulated night recon. No real threat, just fog and tension. Ensign Thayer ran inventory on deck when she stepped aboard. Civilian badge. Dark weather jacket. Ken the satchel. Her boots were scuffed, heavy-soled, definitely not standard issue. She said nothing as she passed him. Just nodded once, then took position near the starboard rail. Lieutenant Rowe raised an eyebrow. "You are observer?" Rowe said. "Yes," she said. Her voice was calm, quiet. "Name?" "Wells." He checked the clipboard, found her under interagency observer list. No rank, no branch. Just clearance, Sierra Echo 3-1. Rowe shrugged. "Stay out of the way." She nodded. Didn't ask where to sit, didn't sit at all. She stood still at the rail, one hand resting lightly on the edge. Thayer caught a glimpse of something on her wrist. Not a watch. Not quite a tattoo. Just a faded ring of ink, half buried beneath her sleeve. Fog closed in before the first hour passed. Thayer logged updates near the console while Rowe briefed the rest of the crew. Standard drill. Coastal approach. Lights out. Radar passive. The older trainees were relaxed, even laughing. One of them, Collins, glanced toward Wells. "Bet she brought snacks. Probably thinks we're whale watching." Someone else muttered. She didn't respond. Didn't move. Just kept her eyes locked on the water like it was speaking and she didn't want to interrupt. Thayer watched the way she stood, balanced, slightly forward on her toes. Like she was expecting the sea to shift. And when it did, a hard starboard nudge from below, she adjusted before anyone else even braced. She didn't flinch. Just shifted weight, smooth and sure, and kept looking ahead. By mile 10, Thayer stopped pretending not to notice. She wasn't reacting to the boat. She was anticipating it. And that meant something else. She wasn't just some liaison. She'd been out here before. The fog thickened by the hour. Compass drifted 2 degrees. Radar began pulsing irregularly, catching echoes off the water like something alive. Thayer sat at the NAV station running dead reckoning updates. Collins leaned over the edge of the map. "Let me guess," he said. "When the tech fails, we ask the observer to read the stars?" Someone behind him laughed. Wells said nothing. She was near the stern now, one hand on the railing, thumb resting against the bolt plate like she knew exactly where the metal would rattle before it did. "Hey, observer," Collins called. She turned slightly. He grinned. "You got a compass in that little notebook of yours?" She looked at him for one long second, then flipped the notebook open, held up a small, folded square of laminated paper. No grid, no color, just hand-drawn angles marked in faded pencil. "Do you?" she asked. Collins blinked, didn't answer. Thayer turned from the console, watching the exchange. Wells tucked the paper away and returned her eyes to the horizon. An hour passed. Thayer checked the trim reading. Slight imbalance. Nothing major. But when the hull rolled again, slower this time, a thick lurch to port, she shifted her feet a split second before the sway hit. He couldn't ignore it now. He crossed to her side, keeping his voice low. "You feel that coming?" Wells nodded. He hesitated. "You Navy?" "No." Thayer studied her face. "You were." She didn't answer right away, then said quietly, "Not the way you mean." Her hand stayed on the railing, firm, steady, scarred across the palm, faint white ridges, like salt had burned it in. Thayer looked down at her boots again, thick soles, laces wrapped low, faded heel stitching, the kind used in maritime boarding teams, not issued stock. He kept his voice low. "Your father?" She didn't look at him. "SEAL Boat Unit 12. Night runs. Coastal lanes. How long?" 15 years. Most of them off paper. Thayer nodded slowly. He didn't ask more. Didn't need to. Because now he understood something the others didn't. She hadn't just observed missions, she'd absorbed them. Line by line. Wake by wake. And she hadn't come on this boat to watch. She came to remember how to steer. By hour 5, the instruments were unreliable. Compass jittered. Radar blinked in and out. The ocean wasn't rough, but it moved with weight, like it knew they didn't. Lieutenant Rowe called for a systems reset. Thayer stayed at the NAV console, eyes flicking between charts and Wells. She hadn't moved from the port side. Still calm, still silent, still watching the sea like it was whispering something only she understood. That's when Collins decided to try again. He stepped over from the stern and dropped an extra headset beside her. "Want to pretend you're on comms?" he said, smirking. Might as well make the role official. Wells didn't blink, didn't speak. Collins laughed. Bet you got all kinds of stories, watching your little waves, drawing your little lines. Bet you think we're the ones who don't belong out here. Thayer stood. He didn't raise his voice, didn't posture, just stepped between them, slow and clean. She's got more time on this kind of water than either of us, Collins scoffed. She's not Navy, not command, not crew. Thayer looked him dead in the eye. No, she's something worse, he said. She's quiet. That shut Collins up for a beat. Thayer didn't wait for permission. He turned to Wells. Ma'am, he said, voice even, if these instruments stay unreliable, could you get us back inshore? No, Nav. Just feel. She met his eyes for the first time. I could. Even in fog? Especially in fog. She turned slightly, glancing toward the line where sky vanished into water. Your drift's been pulling 6 degrees port for the last half-mile. There's a cross-current ahead. 1 minute and you'll feel it in your ankles. Thayer didn't have time to ask how she knew. The boat shifted hard left, not enough to alarm, just enough to confirm. Everyone braced. Everyone, except her. She had already adjusted her weight, like she'd remembered the wave before it arrived. Later, below deck, Thayer sat by the small supply shelf, running course correction. Wells walked past. He didn't speak, but she stopped beside him and held something out. A folded paper. Chart angles, sketched by hand, signed at the bottom, CW, and a number, 31.77 degrees minus 118.21 degrees. He looked up. She didn't smile, didn't explain, just said, That's the lane your sonar won't catch. Your instructor never marked it. My father did. Then she turned and climbed the ladder, one step at a time. Collins never said another word that day, and Thayer didn't ask where the coordinates led. He just wrote them down, quietly, as if they were his. Thayer waited until they were back on shore. The fog hadn't lifted, but command had called the exercise early, citing instrument uncertainty. No one questioned it. Not officially. But Thayer couldn't stop thinking about the paper. Those hand-drawn coordinates. 31.77 degrees minus 118.21 degrees. He stayed behind after the debrief, sat in the small admin room next to the locker bay and pulled up a secure terminal. Typed the numbers slow. Nothing popped on the Navy maps. No buoy. No lane. Just blue. Deep, open water off the California shelf, near enough to training routes to blend in, far enough off the chart to not belong to any. But when he cross-referenced declassified op logs, something flickered. One hit. SE-12, SEAL extraction. No year. No pilot. No crew. Just one line of text, buried in an old briefing summary. Shoreline rendezvous intercepted, recovered via Shadow Lane. Unknown helmsman. Silent handoff. Exit unconfirmed. Thayer sat still. Shadow Lane. His eyes scanned the chart again. That coordinate, the one Wells gave him, was right at the bend of a known drift current, strong enough to pull small craft fast, too unpredictable for standard lanes, unless you knew how to ride it, unless someone had mapped it. He looked again at the paper she gave him. No label, no grid, just motion, like someone had sketched tied by memory, not satellite. He leaned back in the chair. Wells hadn't guessed, she'd remembered. That night, he checked the sign-in roster for observers. There was no Wells listed. No Sierra Echo 3-1, he asked quietly. Nothing came back. Next morning, Thayer walked to the checklist bay near Dock 4, a small shed that smelled of oil and salt. She was already inside, alone, motionless. Thayer held out the folded paper. You were on that op, weren't you? He asked. She didn't answer. Thayer stepped into the light. You weren't just watching, he continued, voice lower. You were part of the lane. Slowly, she turned to face him. I was never in the record, Wells replied. He took a cautious step closer. But your father was, he said. She nodded once, her hands tightening around a pair of worn gloves. They let me sit beside him, she murmured. One run, one time, just in case. In case of what? Thayer asked, barely above a whisper. In case he didn't make it back. She unfolded the gloves carefully and laid them flat on the bench, her fingers lingering on the worn seams. He did, she continued softly. But I remembered how he got us there. Thayer didn't speak, didn't need to. Because what she had done that night on the boat, she hadn't learned it from manuals. She'd learned it by watching the kind of silence that carries people home. It hit during night drills. A second SEAL crew had launched on a different track, southbound, toward a recon point beyond the fog line. Radio contact faded mid-transit. Then a single burst came through. Power cut. No compass. Drifting fast. Fog dense. Then silence. No coordinates. No beacon. Just open sea. Thayer heard it over the ops channel. By the time he reached the control dock, the rescue prep had started. Crews scrambled. Charts unfolded. Sonar screens blinked with interference. No one could pin their last known position. Then he saw her. Wells stood just outside the command shed, watching, saying nothing. Thayer stepped toward her, quick and tense. "They're in the drift, aren't they?" he asked. She nodded once. "Same bend, same cross-pull," she replied, voice low. "If they panicked, they're caught in the underturn." Thayer held out the laminated paper she'd given him days earlier. "You still remember it?" he pressed. She didn't look at it. "I never forgot," she said calmly. Footsteps echoed, and Lieutenant Rowe appeared behind them. "What's going on?" Rowe asked. Thayer glanced back, then turned to Rowe. "She knows how to find them," he explained. Rowe hesitated. Wells didn't. She stepped forward, pulled a piece of chalk from her pocket, and knelt beside the dock. With one swift motion, she drew a curve across the concrete, then tapped 3 points in sequence. "This is where they lost power," she began, voice steady. "Here's the pull. Here's where they'll surface, if they don't try to steer out." Rose stared at the marks. "You're certain?" he asked, eyes narrowing. She stood slowly. "Only if they're quiet," she replied. He looked at Thayer, then back at her, and gave a single, decisive nod. One chase boat launched within minutes, and Thayer watched as she walked down to the edge of the dock, hands behind her back, eyes on the water. The fog swallowed the rescue team, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then a voice crackled over the radio. "Rescue 1 to base, visual contact, found them drifting, confirming crew's safe." The dock stayed silent. No one cheered. Instead, they turned slowly, one by one, and looked at her. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just stood there, like she already knew they would be found. By morning, the tone on the dock had shifted. No more jokes. No sideways comments, no glances passed between crew. They moved differently now, slower near her, straighter in posture, louder only when she wasn't close. Wells returned nothing. Same dark jacket, same silence, same place near the rail, hands tucked behind her back. Only now, when she stood there, they waited. Thayer noticed first during the refuel check. Collins, who once mocked her, stood 5 feet away with a folded chart under his arm. Not offering it, just holding it, hoping maybe she'd glance down and correct him. She didn't. But the next day, that same chart showed up on the NAV table, cleaned up, angles corrected, routes penciled over in a slightly older hand. No one said how. During briefing, Rowe paused mid-sentence. He was explaining tide offsets, but glanced at her when he reached the part about the southern drift. "Wells," he said, "you ran this curve before, didn't you?" She looked up, nodded once. "With my father, on a black lane." Rowe didn't ask more, just adjusted his map slightly to reflect the arc she'd once drawn in chalk. The room followed suit. After briefing, Thayer caught up with her on the lower deck. He held out a folded sheet. "Your handwriting's showing up in more places." She took the paper, glanced at it. "Not mine," he smiled. "Could have fooled me." Wells looked out toward the harbor. "These boats don't need another pilot," she said. "They need to remember what quiet looks like." Thayer folded his arms. "You taught them that without saying a word." She didn't reply. Just turned, walked back up the deck, boots steady on the metal steps, and disappeared into the hangar. No salute, no farewell. Just silence, the kind that speaks louder after you've heard what it can save. She didn't come back the next day. No one announced it. No name pulled from the manifest, no gear removed, just absence. But something in the air felt heavier. Calmer, too. The sea was still fogged over, but the crew walked quieter, ran drills slower, checked equipment twice instead of once, especially before launch. Rowe adjusted his tone during briefing. "Double-check manual compass before instruments sync," he said, then paused, almost glanced toward the spot where she used to stand. That afternoon, Thayer sat at the NAV desk, carefully folding map corners. Collins passed behind him and paused. "You marking drift patterns?" Collins asked. Thayer glanced up briefly. Something like that, he replied. The paper in front of him was clean, except for a penciled arc off the main channel, one no one taught him. He traced it from memory, the same chalk line she'd drawn on the dock that night. Below it, in small lettering, he wrote, "Run silent, follow current." Not regulation, not in any manual. But every time he looked at it, something settled behind his ribs, like steady air in a turning tide. A week later, a new recruit joined the boat crew. Young, green, curious. After training, he caught Thayer outside the hangar. "Sir?" the recruit asked. "Why do some of the team fold their maps that way? Diagonal, like a wingtip?" Thayer looked at his own, corner-tucked, just like hers used to be. "No reason," he said, then smiled, just barely. "Just someone we listened to once." The recruit nodded. Didn't ask more? And that was the point. No plaque had gone up. No salute was ever given. No title pinned to her jacket. But the water remembered. The routes ran smoother. The crew, without knowing why, began waiting 2 beats longer before launch, to listen, to breathe, to feel. As if somewhere between the fog and the tide, Wells was still on board. The chalk line was still there, faint now, worn down by weather and boot soles, but not gone. Just a curve along the dock edge, looping gently away from the straight-cut lanes. Thayer never redrew it. Didn't need to. Every crew member knew not to step over it without checking their heading. She never returned. Not officially. Not even in records. But strange things started showing up. A folded weather chart with hand-marked pressure shifts. A strip of tape on a wall panel, aligned perfectly to moonrise on overcast nights. A single black and white photograph pinned to the corkboard behind the NAV desk. Grainy, ocean horizon, with a woman barely in frame, hand resting on the rail. No name. No caption. Only a faint handwritten note at the bottom. "Drift doesn't lie." No one admitted who put it there. But no one took it down, either. Rowe changed his briefing order. Now he started each launch with the same line. "Remember, measure twice. Trust the silence." The new recruits didn't always understand it. But they saw how the senior crew paused at the waterline, how they touched the rail before stepping on board, how they folded their maps just so. And eventually, they stopped asking why. One late evening, Thayer stood alone by the same rail Wells had once favored. The tide was pulling soft. He could feel it under his boots. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the laminated sheet she had given him, corners worn, ink fading. He unfolded it once, traced the same arc with one finger, then refolded it. Sharp, clean, tucked it away. He didn't speak, didn't salute. Just watched the water draw quiet under the night sky. She hadn't needed to be the loudest voice. She never was. But somehow, every time the sea shifted beneath them, they listened for her anyway.